nice to have dinners. I love crock pot.
It was during the lunchtime.
And it's just come home and it's ready. Like when we went out and voted that Father's Day, I had all the chicken enchiladas, not enchiladas, fajitas in the crock pot cooking all day. And it was just so nice to come home. And I had already in the refrigerator gotten all the stuff, and I'd already cut up the lettuce and tomatoes. So it was just so nice. Just put it out. You know, using those bags in the crock pot, even to take care of the leftovers. It's like, yes. I'm all about making it simple and better.
I'll tell you, this week I'm just so glad you turned me on to that.
That's easy.
I got an extra mashed potatoes this night for the guys at home.
Don't let them see the container. I've heard
Or under the table?
Yes, on the floor, please.
like to the regular potatoes,
Right.
you can add some sour cream. And,
Yeah.
I mean, you can make them. I have even put cheese on top. You know. Real
Yeah, you can hold it up. You know how to kick the bottom of it.
I got to check. Oh.
Jurors enter the courtroom.
Jurors entering the courtroom.
All right. CRE for Duval County, State of Florida.
Good morning, everyone.
Today's lab time by 1. If you can just give me a heads up when I can like have a break or if we're having lunch. Okay, and then that can just like sneak out, so that way they don't see me on camera.
Yes, you're not done. You're not making us back there.
We'll stay to lunch. Your appointment's at 1?
I have to leave at 1.
Before you get to
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, as long as if it's before 1.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Well, so you have a customer. they're all in? Okay, then you're bringing those?
Here.
Okay.
Here's a color copy of the evidence list. It's printed in the back. I don't know if you remember that.
Sure. I'll take the color coded one. Don't think anything about it. It's fine. I don't really have a problem. We're just waiting for Mr. Richardson to come out. As soon as he's out, both juries are here. Your witness, I think I saw her earlier. I was down here, so she's ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So we have 3 things that we want to talk about prior to getting started.
Okay.
So,
Well, let's just wait till Mr. Richardson's here, and then he should be coming any second.
yes, sir.
right, let's go on the record. We do have counsel for the state and for the defendants present, as well as Mr. Hayes and Mr. Richardson. Our juries are here and ready to work, but you had some preliminary matters, Ms. Coe?
Yes, sir. I'm not sure if we'll get to this witness today, but I asked Mr. Barbieri to be here. He represents Cynthia Hayes. I alluded to that earlier this week, but I asked if he'd be able to come forward and state Ms. Hayes' position regarding any questions that defense counsel might ask of her related to her pending case, which these two defendants are co-defendants of. So I didn't want to get into that mess without having talk about it, talk it through with the court.
Okay. Mr. Barbieri? Morning, sir.
Good morning, Your Honor. Ms. Hayes does have a pending case for the charge of RICO, Your Honor. Any questions that were posed to her in relation to gang affiliation will be both in our record.
All right. I understand, Mr. Hernandez, anything I need to hear from you?
Yes, sir. Basically, she's pending charges. She was released on an ROR after she started cooperating with the state because of the pending RICO charges. I think it's based on bias that I should be able to explore through cross-examination.
All right. Ms. Wright, is that your position as well?
Well, Your Honor, I guess it would depend on the purpose for which we are calling Ms. Hayes. It's kind of hard to include this issue in vacuum right now, not knowing what she's specifically going to testify to. I don't think she can partially invoke her right, talk about some stuff and then talk about other stuff. I think that she would have to either invoke with regard to everything or not invoke. But I guess it's hard to kind of figure it out before she testifies. I don't know.
All right.
Can I make it simple?
You certainly.
Ms. Hayes was in a car where the firearm was found with these two defendants. The state of Florida does not anticipate asking her any questions regarding her gang affiliation, whether her brother was in a gang, whether his friend was in a gang, nothing about that. It was a Super Bowl Sunday where they went to go eat chicken wings and to talk about the factual circumstances surrounding that traffic stop and what happened afterwards. My understanding from Ms. Barbieri, there is no objection to that. She's not incriminating herself as it relates to those particular facts. I think Mr. Hernandez's concern related to whether he can talk about that she was ROR'd on pending charges, and we never really get into the nature of those charges anyway. It's the amount of time that she's looking at. I think those are all relevant questions and that should be posed to her. Could possibly open up the door for all kinds of things because these two defendants are also co-defendants in that pending case. So in talking about all of those things, I think Mr. Hernandez's concern, we don't have any objection to him asking any of those questions related to her getting ROR'd on pending charges, and they're both set, I think, first-degree felonies, if I'm not mistaken. The amount of time that she's looking at on her pending charges are all relevant questions. But questions related to my understanding of the assertion is that any questions like, are you in a gang? Is your brother in a gang? Is JB in a gang? Were y'all all in a gang and doing shootings and all that kind of stuff? I think that is where the problem lies.
All right. I think I understand the state's position. Mr. Hernandez, does that make you feel more comfortable about having the ability to fully cross-examine Ms. Hayes regarding her bias and why she may be testifying in the way that she is because she's facing these charges and she's facing this much time? And
Your Honor, those are the items I was going to get into, and I expected to be able to ask those. I understand, of course, I was going to say what the charge was, but if the court limits me to saying pending charges, then so be it.
I don't know that I'm opposed to her asking that she's facing RICO charges. I do think you get into dangerous territory if you go much further because I don't want her, I'm sure you don't want her mentioning that her brother and her brother's co-defendant in this case are similarly facing those charges. But maybe if you were able to pre-trial, or we could proffer that issue a little bit before she bring out the juries, we can do that. But it'd certainly be my position that you would be entitled to fully cross-examine her as to issues of bias. That's your right, and I'm not going to stop you from doing that. I don't think, if I'm hearing Ms. Kite correctly, she does not either. But getting into the specifics of the RICO and her gang affiliation, especially as it relates to her brother's gang affiliation, then that would be where we'd have to stop. And I think you probably would want to stop there anyway, right, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, sir.
Or you wouldn't want to go there, let alone.
Years of doing this, I realize what's a landmine and what's not a landmine.
I know that you do. So I think we have an understanding, but let me state it so the record is clear. When Ms. Hayes is called to testify, she'll be called to testify about certain specific facts or alleged facts that happened that relate to this particular case, and nothing else about the gang aspect to it, and what she knows or doesn't know about PCE or any other gang. That does not stop Mr. Hernandez or Ms. Wright from cross-examining her as to why she may be here, that she's got her own charges. Those are serious charges. She's facing, multiple years in prison. All that's fair game on cross-examination. It goes to bias. But nobody's going to talk to her about her understanding of gangs, or these gangs in particular, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Ms. Wright, is that, you said you rightly asked or suggested it's hard to know what to object to if you don't know what she's going to say. Now that you have a better idea, what's your position?
Your Honor, I'll provide that, of course.
Well, I'm not so much making a ruling as y'all, I think, correctly understand, and I think the state correctly understands the full range of cross-examination that's appropriate, being able to attack bias. If there becomes an issue, or you think that you're about to step on a landmine, or have some question, I don't like sidebars during trials, if you haven't noticed, but that would be a good time to have one, and maybe we can proffer something so that there is no issue. Other than that, have at it on cross. All right? Any other issues, Mr. Barbieri, from your point of view? All right, sir. Yes, sir. All right, anything else?
John, I don't know if you want to address this now. This witness is not going to be called today, but it's related to the medical examiner. We have reached agreement on all the photos to be admitted except for 2, and we can address that now or later. The court wants to address it.
Can I see them? The photographs in question. These are the 2 that are in dispute.
Yes. So the court is aware the significance of that photo that is related to. That is the exit wound. Those are the only 2 photos, and you'll see it. It's a small wound that's next to the other section.
All right, Madam Clerk. No, I saw it. All right, the objection from the defense.
Basically, graphic photographs, 403, is a photograph of the child's intestines. It goes, the exit wound can be talked about without photographs. Certainly, both are not necessary, but I'm rejecting both on 403 grounds.
Ms. Wright, your position?
Your Honor, my objection is the same. I would add that there really is no issue in this case as to trajectory or where the gunshot was. I mean, that hasn't really been brought up. So I don't know, other than to obviously prejudice the jury beyond any positive value, I don't see why we need to have that photograph. If there is an issue as to the trajectory that the state is anticipating, I think they can do that with the trajectory rods through the car seat. I don't think that showing the exit wound is necessary. Given the nature of that photograph, given already the sensitive nature of this case, I think that just goes over it.
Right. I'm going to reserve ruling on it. We'll see how the testimony comes out, but I'll tip my hand slightly. I don't think it's necessary, State. Based on what I understand the facts to be so far and what's really in dispute in this case, which is more in the line of a whodunit than what happened. Again, I'm not saying no, but and I'm also anxious to bring the jury in and get started. So I'm not faulting you for bringing it up early. I appreciate addressing those things, and I'm reserving. I'm not deciding it, but that's my inclination. So if you want me to incline the other way at the appropriate time, then the argument needs to be addressed as to those defense's lawyers' concerns, which I think are legitimate ones under the facts that I know them thus far. Okay, anything else before we bring in the juries?
Nothing from the defense for Hayes.
And State, you ready? Yes, Your Honor. All right, bring in the juries. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, ma'am, bring them in.
The jury is entering the courtroom.
Welcome back, folks. You can take your seats. I trust everybody had a good night's rest last night. And was everyone still able to abide by my instructions and not discuss the case with anyone or look up any information online? Yes. And everybody is indicating that they did. Very well. All right, State, I think we were in the middle of Detective Pfister's testimony. Is that where you'd like to begin?
Yes, Your Honor, we may call her in.
You may. Yeah.
I swear from the testimony, give you the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Pfister, last night we left off starting with the suspect car. I'd like to rewind just a moment, going back to the crime scene where you collected a number of shell casings. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you swab some of those casings that actually the casings that you found at the crime scene?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Okay. Can you explain to the members of the jury how you collect DNA swabs?
How we collect DNA swab, it's very similar to a Q-tip that they have in your drawer in the bathroom. However, ours are actually have paper over it, so they're sterile. We open them up, we're in clean gloves, we place 1 drop of distilled water on the Q-tip, and then we swab the casing, we swab the head stamp and along the sides. Then that Q-tip is placed right back into the sterile packaging and then placed in an envelope and placed into the property room.
Does the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office work with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement regularly?
Yes, ma'am, that we do.
Does the Florida Department of Law Enforcement help train you as a crime scene detective on how to collect DNA for their purposes in analyzing?
I have taken a small class with FDLE to obtain swabs.
Now, I want to specifically focus your attention on touch DNA. Can you see that with the naked eye?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And has FDLE asked you all if you have similar items of evidence to swab with only one swab?
Yes, ma'am. If we have, in a group of casings in the roadway and they're all 9mm, we're going to swab the 9mm with one swab. Let's say that you have some 9mm and maybe a .223 round in that same area. The .223 round will have a separate swab, but the like items in that grouping will have the same swab.
Verify may have permission to approach throughout this testimony.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We saw this yesterday, which would be States Exhibit 300, 301, 302, 303, 304, 305, 306, and 307. We saw this yesterday.
Yes, ma'am.
You recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
Now I'm going to show you States Exhibit 370. Is that the touch DNA swab that you took from these exhibits?
Yes, ma'am, it is. It's for casings 1 through 8 that were in the roadway in front of 710 Spearing Street.
Okay. So you used one swab on all of these 9mm casings?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that because they were all found in a similar location?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now I'm going to show you States Exhibit 321 and 371. Is this the swab from the 223 casing that you found by the shed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And now I'm going to show you States Exhibit 323, which is a .45 caliber casing that you found on the other side of the fence near 716 Spearing Street.
Yes, ma'am.
And then States Exhibit 372, did you swab that casing with one swab?
Yes, ma'am.
Is one swab associated with those single casings?
Yes, ma'am. With the single casing that was at 716 Spearing Street on the side of the house, it has its own swab because it's a .45, and it wasn't in the same location or the same caliber as the ones that were in 710 Spearing Street in the roadway.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry.
Now I'd like to go back to the suspect vehicle. Was that transported, once it was recovered, to the sheriff's office warehouse as Ms. Brown's car was transferred to the warehouse to work on?
Yes, Ms. Brown.
Tamisha Brown's white
Oh.
Corolla, the victim's
I'm sorry.
vehicle?
I'm sorry, yes. I was already there processing Aiden's mother's vehicle, and Detective Kipple, who's in our unit, actually followed that vehicle to the warehouse while we were there.
Okay, so similar to the car that Aiden McClendon was transported, that happened similarly with the suspect vehicle, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Same procedures. The doors in the trunk and the hood were all sealed with evidence tape prior to being transferred to the warehouse.
Okay. Showing you States Exhibit 269, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am. That is the suspect vehicle right after it was placed into the warehouse.
And you indicated that that car was sealed when it came into the warehouse?
Yes, ma'am. If you look right here and right here on the driver's side of the vehicle, and you can see it on the hood too, those are the evidence seals that we placed prior to being towed to the warehouse.
And so what does that indicate to you?
That nobody's been in the vehicle since it left the location where it was picked up by Detective Kipple.
On this vehicle, I want to direct your attention to the windows. Was there extremely dark tint that was on these windows?
Yes, ma'am. There was I don't recall the exact number of the tent, but they were actually, the tent was on the outside of the vehicle. When you get vehicles tinted, they actually place the tint on the inside. This is actually on the outside of the vehicle.
Showing you State's Exhibit 270 is at the passenger side with the seals.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and does the tint continue on the front window, passenger window, and then on the other side too?
Yes, ma'am.
Showing you State's Exhibit 271, what is that?
When I was walking around the vehicle right after it was placed in the warehouse, I noticed a casing right here underneath the windshield wiper, closer to the passenger side of the vehicle.
Okay. State's Exhibit 272, is that a close-up of that casing?
Yes, ma'am, that's a closer-up view photograph of that casing that is near the windshield wiper.
State's Exhibit 273, unlike the passenger and the driver's side, was the back window tinted like that?
No, ma'am, it was not.
And then the tag on this vehicle, what type of tag is that?
That's a temporary tag.
Is that something that you would get, I guess, if you just got the car?
If you just purchased a vehicle, you can get that from the DMV. It's not a permanent metal tag that most of us have after we've had a car for a little bit.
State's Exhibit 274, actually, let me go past that. The tint, and was that collected off of this vehicle?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Prior to the tint being collected, was it examined to see if you could see any fingerprints or anything like that?
We visually inspected the tent there at the scene. I was also working with our latent print examiner, and we decided to remove the tent so he could take it back to the lab and process it in a more controlled environment.
Okay. And you mentioned the latent print examiner. Did he actually come out and help you in processing this vehicle?
Yes, he did.
Can you explain to the members of the jury what latent prints are and what you're looking for?
What the latent prints are is on the tips of your fingers, you'll see the tiny lines, grooves, dots, and whorls and swirls. What that is the oils and the proteins in your skin. When you touch something, you're leaving behind your fingerprint. And that's what we're looking for when we use, normally it's called black powder, and we use a brush similar to the consistency of baby powder, and we twirl it on an object where we don't know if there's a print to see if any latent prints actually do come to the surface.
And did you do this, that is the latent lifts, off the exterior of this vehicle?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as 345. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am, it's the window tint for the passenger side front rear end vent.
Okay, and you're reading off the bag, is that?
Yes, ma'am,
To
it's-
help you indicate
yes.
where that came from?
What we wrote on the bag that night, and my initials and signature on the seal on the back.
Okay, and 344.
This is the window tint from the driver's side front rear end vent for the suspect vehicle. It's the lettering, and then my initials are on the back.
Okay. So this tint was placed on the outside of those windows?
Yes, ma'am.
And then State's Exhibit 390, if you could take a moment, open that envelope and see if you recognize those cards inside.
Yes, ma'am, these are the latent lift cards where I've actually lifted prints off the suspect vehicle. And this is what I've submitted into the latent print unit for examination.
Okay, hold on. Do you document where these lifts came from on the back of the card?
Yes, ma'am. On the back of the card, I have our signal for a case. In this instance, it's a 5. That's our signal for our murder. The case number for this case, the victim, I didn't know the victim's name at that time. The location that I'm processing, which it was 1089 Haynes Street, and then the location of the lift, and then I draw a little diagram indicating where I lifted it from.
Okay. And then the back of this card, these are all similar, so we'll just use this one. This tape that's coming across, what is that?
That is where I've actually have what looked like a lift, and I place tape, and then I lift it off, and then I place it onto the card. So the lifts are actually on the card.
Okay, and so you don't determine whether these lifts are of value, do you?
No, that goes to our latent print unit, where they analyze it from there.
Showing you State's Exhibit 275. What is this a photograph of?
That's a photograph of the front compartment of the vehicle, showing that the seat belts on the driver and the front passenger are latched.
And did you take a DNA swab of this area?
Yes, ma'am. I took one from the front passenger compartment, and I also took one from the front, or the driver's compartment.
Okay.
And in this instance, I actually took 2 separate swabs.
Okay. And so you took a DNA swab of this area of the car also?
Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 277. What did you do in this area?
I took a DNA swab from there and also photographs from that area, and also searched the area for any evidence in this case.
Actually, let me go back. The way that you mark your DNA swabs from the compartment areas of the vehicle, are those similar to the ones that we've already talked about?
Yes, ma'am. When I process the interior of a vehicle, I label the driver's compartment, it's driver's compartment and interior door. So I swab the seat, I swab the seat belt latches, the steering wheel, the gear shift and then the sides of the door, like where the window button is, where the lock button is, and the side of the door, like where you would lay your hand or your arm would rest on the door. That's what I swab for in the driver's compartment.
Why do you choose those particular areas?
Choose areas where skin or where if you were talking, where your saliva would go onto the steering wheel. I'm swabbing areas where skin to object is going to touch.
I'm going to start with this one. You mainly did latent lifts on the outside of this car, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 375. Is that a DNA swab from the exterior of the car?
Yes, ma'am. This is the touch DNA swab from the Toyota Corolla front passenger door exterior. In those instances, we do the underneath the door handles, where somebody would lift the door handle to open the door.
Was that something nearly impossible to get a latent lift off?
Underneath, it's very difficult to see, for one, and to get the tape up there, where if anybody's ever messed with larger tape, it crinkles. So we want to get, that's the best place to get the DNA. Where on the top part of the door handle, I'm actually processing that for latent lifts, because it's where I can see it instead of going up where the mechanisms where you would lift up for the door.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you a series, which I all believe come from the interior of the car. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 376.
Yes, ma'am, it's the passenger rear exterior.
All right, 383,
Rear passenger door molding,
381,
front passenger door and molding.
373,
It's the touch DNA from the driver's front door exterior.
377,
That's touch DNA swab from the interior driver's door.
374,
That's touch DNA from the driver's rear door exterior.
378,
Touch DNA swab from the interior driver's compartment.
380,
Touch DNA swab from interior driver's door compartment.
379,
Touch DNA swab interior rear driver's door.
and then 382,
Touch DNA swab from the front passenger compartment.
384.
Touch DNA swab from rear passenger compartment.
Okay. Are all those swabs that are collected in these series of pieces of evidence consistent with how you collected all what you've just explained for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. States Exhibit 278. Can you tell us what this is a photograph of?
This is a photograph of where the CD player is in the Toyota Corolla.
And what's the screen?
The screen is what is set up on Bluetooth.
Okay. Did you take this, did you turn on the car, turn on the radio, and this is what you saw?
Yes, ma'am. A lot of times I turn on, or what I do is I turn on the radio to see if there's a CD in there, because a lot of times people put CDs in it, and that's where they've touched for latent prints. So I'm seeing if there's actually a CD in there that I can process.
Okay, so we see Z820. That's not your phone connected to this car, is it?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you're definitely not real nigga KK, are you?
No, ma'am.
All right. Showing you States Exhibit 279.
That is the engine compartment of the Toyota Corolla?
Were there items found in this location?
Yes, ma'am. I also found 9mm casings in the little pockets here on the passenger side and then on the driver's side. It was underneath the hood, so you could not see it with the hood closed.
Okay. Could you erase that? Thanks. Showing you States Exhibit 280. What is that?
This is a 9mm casing on the passenger side of the vehicle.
Okay. Is that exactly how you found it?
Yes, ma'am.
States Exhibit 281, is that a close-up?
That's a close-up of that 9mm casing underneath the hood.
States Exhibit 282, is that the head stamp for it?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
States Exhibit 283, is that a photograph of where you found the other casings?
Yes, ma'am. That's on the driver's side of the vehicle.
Okay. States Exhibit 284, is that a close-up of that?
Yes, ma'am. That's two 9mm casings that were under the hood on the driver's side.
Okay, is that exactly how you found them?
Yes, ma'am.
States Exhibit 285, are those the head stamps for those casings?
Yes, ma'am. It's the head stamps of those two casings on the driver's side.
Total, how many casings did you find in the hood area of this vehicle?
4.
Did you take the swabs of those casings for this vehicle?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
I'm going to show you what's been entered into evidence as States Exhibit 349, 348, 347, and 346. I'm going to give these over to you and tell me if you recognize them.
It's okay. Yes, ma'am. These are the 9mm casings that were underneath the driver's hood.
Okay. The ones that we've seen by photograph, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then look at these. I think I included an extra one. Just separate out the 9mm swabs that you have there. Okay, thank you.
Just a second.
And then so showing you States Exhibit 387, 386, and then 385. Are those the 3 swabs that you took of these casings?
Yes, ma'am. This is the touch DNA swab from the 9mm that was near the windshield wiper. This one is the touch DNA swab underneath the hood on the driver's side. There's for one swab for those 2 casings. And this one is the swab for the one on the passenger side.
Okay. Just, this one's a little bit different. This yellow sticker, do you recognize that to be from FDLE?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So those aren't your stickers, that's
No, ma'am.
that they've been analyzed?
Yeah, no, ma'am. Our sheriff's office sticker are the white ones.
Okay.
And the blue tape is the sheriff's office tape.
Okay. Did you thoroughly search this vehicle?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit 86, is that how you found the trunk of this car?
Yes, ma'am. When I photograph a vehicle, I photograph each section of the vehicle as I'm going in to process it. Before I even touch anything in the trunk, when I open it up, I have my camera, I take a photo as is before I've disturbed anything.
Okay. State's Exhibit 287, what is this a photograph of?
In this photograph, I've removed that rear carpet and the umbrella and stuff that you saw in the previous photo. I've removed it from the vehicle, so the only thing left is the tire and the tire jack.
State's Exhibit 288, what is this a photograph of?
That is the rear carpet on the back seat on the passenger side on this side. This is the passenger side, and this is the driver's side rear.
Okay, so that's looking as if you're looking in the trunk with the carpet removed.
Yes, ma'am, looking into the trunk from the opening.
State's Exhibit 289, what is this a photograph of?
In this photograph, I've actually crawled into the trunk, and right here, wedged near the seatbelt latch for the rear passenger side, I actually saw a casing from going from in the trunk, looking down there, and you can see it's right there.
Okay, so, all right, and so that's what you saw when you were taking this car apart, essentially.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, so did you go even further?
Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 290, how'd you get that photo?
Wedging myself up against the rear seat and aiming the camera down in that area.
Okay. State's Exhibit 291, what is this?
That is, I've removed this back seat on the Corolla, and the casing is in this area.
And then 292, is that the casing that you ultimately collected after you removed the seat?
Yes, ma'am. That's the head stamp of a 762 by 39 casing that was wedged by the seatbelt latch.
Showing you what's been entered as State's Exhibit 350. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am. This is the 762 casing that I recovered, and as you see right here, that I recovered from the vehicle.
Okay. And now, did you take a swab of that casing?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
All right, showing you State's Exhibit 388. Is that the swab that you took of this casing that you found in the back seat of the suspect car?
Yes, ma'am. This is the swab where I collected the touch DNA from that casing.
Thank you. Did detectives in this case give you 2 cell phones to collect?
Yes, ma'am, they did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as 16P and then 16Q. Do you recognize those as the phones that detectives gave you to place into the property room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor's time the state will seek to introduce 16P and 16Q as the next number of exhibits.
Any objection?
No objection, no.
Will be so admitted.
16P. May I have a moment to confer with the clerk?
You may.
I apologize. These are mismarked, Your Honor. These should be, if I may correct them on the actual exhibit tags, this should be 21U. And then 21B is in Victor. If I may have those marked as the next numbered exhibits.
So what are the exhibits?
21U became 455, and 21B became 456.
All right, they'll be so admitted without objection.
No further questions?
All right, any cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Morning, Detective Pfister. How you doing?
Good morning, I'm doing well.
Okay. You talked about a number of stated exhibits in the very beginning of your direct testimony, the aerial views,
Yes, sir.
and you talked about the houses behind 710 Spearing Street. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The houses were located to the north behind 710 Spearing Street. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Albert Street in the aerial views is to the south. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. And the residents 710, 716, and 720 are to the north of Albert Street.
Right. So Albert Street is to the south of the front of 710 Spearing Street. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when you're looking at those aerial views, the stadium, which is on the side of, well, where Spearing Street is that to the east or the west?
From the Jaguar Stadium,
Yes.
it's actually to the west. The Spearing Street and Albert Street, at that intersection, is actually to the west of the stadium where the Jaguars play.
Okay. If I were at the front of the home on Spearing Street, and if I were to face the Jaguar Stadium, which direction is that, the west or the east?
It's to the east. It's actually to the southeast, to be exact.
Of course. And then from the aerial view, if you're looking at the aerial view, to the left of the driveway would be to the west. Is that correct?
Depends on which area you're looking at. You'd have to show me the photograph that you're,
Okay.
you could spin it different directions, and it would be left. It
I'll
depends on which
come
way.
back to this because I'll probably have to get the state to help me out with their, I'll show you Status Exhibit 3 before we finish the questioning there, okay? Unless you can put it up right now, if you don't mind.
It's 3. That won't do. Could you do 4, or you want to find 3? 4. Okay. I have 3. I could follow. Okay, hold on, give me a second, I'll go back down.
Okay, if you could touch your screen, we're going to go ahead and work with Status Exhibit 4, okay?
Yes, sir.
Have you got your screen up?
Yes, sir, I do.
If you just put a marking where north is, where the row house,
North goes this way. And if you look right here, I've actually drawn one in the road indicating north.
okay. Y'all
And that's-
always do that with these aerial photos, is that correct?
Yes, sir. It helps the air unit when they're taking when the detective goes up to take the photo, it helps orient them what houses they're looking at for one and which direction north is.
Okay, if you got north that way, then south is the opposite direction, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But could you draw that on the screen there,
You want me to draw north, south, east, west?
where south is?
South is going this way.
Okay,
East is going this way.
that's east. And if you could, west. Thank you. All right, and if I wanted to just delete this photo, go ahead and turn it off, that'd be it. Sorry about that. Sure, sure. You were the lead evidence technician, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I was.
You had other evidence technicians working that night, is that right?
Yes, sir. The detectives that worked with me on the scene for each of the days was Detective Whittlesey and Detective Keeling.
The lead detective on this case that's not an evidence technician is Detective D.K. Scott, is that correct?
Yes, he was the lead homicide detective from our homicide unit.
You and Detective Scott talk with one another, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We were in constant contact with each other.
Okay. You're directing the other evidence technicians, and you're talking with Detective Scott, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Detective Scott could request for you to do something, is that correct?
Correct.
And then you would normally do it, is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir, I would.
Okay. Did Detective Scott direct you to go to the Gate gas station on the corner of Moncrief and 45th Street and pull the surveillance video or the video from that gas station?
No, sir, he did not.
Okay. And obviously, you didn't do that, is that correct?
No, sir. The detectives that usually go and get the surveillance video are usually the homicide team. They work as a team just like we do in the crime scene unit. And from what I've seen in my 10 years in the crime scene unit, the lead detective will have another detective, I need you to go get this video recording for me or canvass this area, and that's how they do that. My main concentration on this case was the houses at 710, 716, 720 Spearing Street, and the vehicles that I processed. That was my main focus for this entire case.
Okay, so you're unaware of whether that tape or whether there exists a tape at the Gate gas station on 45th Street and Moncrief for the date of 29 January, whether that was obtained, right?
I have no idea.
Okay. If I see Detective Scott, it might be a better question for him, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you take a measurement from the front of 710 Spearing Street, where the concrete driveway begins, to the Albert Street Road, where the shell casings were found? Did you take a measurement to see what the distance was?
From the front of the residence
Yes.
to the roadway, yes, we did.
Okay, what was that distance?
I'd have to refer back to my report to get you the exact number.
Please, if you've got your report there.
On page 7 of my supplemental report, the distance from bullet hole A on the south side of the residence of 710 Spearing Street to Albert Street was 84 feet 2 inches approximately. And for the court, supplemental number 5 report.
84 feet, 2 inches?
Yes, sir, 84 feet 2 inches approximately.
Were you able to determine where Ms. Tamisha Brown's vehicle was parked on the driveway when it first started receiving rounds?
No, sir, nobody can.
Pardon me?
Nobody can.
Okay. Did you question Ms. Tamisha Brown to ask her where it was parked?
No, sir. My main focus in this case is on the evidence, the residents, and the vehicles. I don't talk to witnesses. I don't talk to victims in the cases. That is up to the homicide detectives.
So it's up to the homicide detective to ask these type of questions, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Maybe another question that I need to ask Detective Scott, is that correct?
If that's a question you want to ask him, absolutely.
Yes. Did you take a measurement from the marker for shell casing 1 to shell casing 7 for that distance?
I don't believe I did. But when we do our diagrams, the machine that we use is very similar to what surveyors use when they survey roads. We can actually, what we do is we place a pole that has a reflector, and then we have the machine that hits the reflector. So those measurements can actually be taken from measuring on the diagram program from that casing to that case and the approximate distance.
Was it done in this case?
No, sir, but the diagram was completed, yes, sir. So
Pardon me?
the diagram was completed in that manner.
You talked about how a shell casing is ejected from a semi-automatic earlier, whenever you were talking about the shell casings hitting the road and possibly rolling. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When a shell casing is ejected from a semi-automatic, it's ejected to the right and to the rear. Is that correct?
It can go straight to the right, it can go to the rear. It just depends on what angle the gun was held at the time. If you're cocked a little bit to the left, it's going to go more to the front and to the left. If you're more straight on, it's going to start ejecting straight out to the right. And then when it hits, just like I explained yesterday, it's going to hit the concrete, and it's not going to just stick like glue onto the roadway. It's going to bounce, it's going to roll, and things like that.
Okay. And that's the same direction that a shell casing would eject for the rifle, in this case, the Mac. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit 43 was the glass with the apartment sticker. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir, I do.
That was found on, I believe, Spearing Street. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it was found in front of 716 Spearing Street in the road, in the actual northbound lane of Spearing Street.
There were orange lines going through that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
There were orange lines basically going through the rear view mirror, the defrosting lines. Is that right?
Yes, sir. From my experience from driving and having cars with rear window defrost, they have the little lines that go from side to side on the back.
Were you able to determine how many lines were in the rear view window that was blown out?
No, the window wasn't there anymore.
But we've got a pattern of those lines that's shown in State's Exhibit 43. Is that correct?
There's a photograph of those lines on that sticker, yes, sir. I couldn't tell you how many lines there were on it. That's why I took a photograph of it to encapsize it for later.
Do you remember how many lines there were on State's Exhibit 43?
As I just stated, I don't know. That's why I took a photograph of it. You would have to put the photograph up and I can count.
Right. The 223 shell casing, you stated that was found by the shed on 710 Spearing Street. Is that correct?
Yes, right at the corner of the property back there.
Okay. That would indicate a shell casing was ejected from a rifle. Is that correct?
A 223 round is from a rifle, yes, sir.
The last part of your testimony, or at least the majority of your testimony today, has been on the suspect's vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you, if you remember, or if you need to look at your reports, feel free to, when was the suspect's vehicle transported? In other words, when did JSO obtain it, and when was it transported to the warehouse?
Looking back at my report, I'll have to look at the date.
Please, please.
On 2/3 of 2016.
February 3rd?
Yes, sir.
The shell casings that were found in the engine block area of the suspect's vehicle were 9mm. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The Bluetooth photograph, State's Exhibit 278. The phone says Z820, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that a model of a phone?
I have no idea.
Were you able to determine when the Bluetooth was programmed by that phone, a date?
No, sir. The only thing I know is when I turned the car on, that's what popped up.
Are you able to, in your knowledge are you able to determine, or was there a date indicated when it was programmed?
I have no idea. There's no date that came out on the screen. I'm not electronically savvy when it comes to the Bluetooth. I can barely set my own car.
In the shell casing that was in State's Exhibit 290, 292, in the rear seat that was wedged between the rear seat belt, that was a 7.62 shell casing, is that correct?
Yes, sir. It was a 7.62 by 39 casing.
And that would indicate that it was fired from a rifle, is that right?
It is a rifle round, yes, sir.
And again, the rifle, or the MAC-90 in this case, ejects the shell casing up into the right rear, is that right?
I've never fired that one, but I would assume so, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
I've never fired that MAC-90 that you're talking about,
Okay.
but I would assume so.
Okay. Your Honor, I have no other questions.
All right, Ms. Wright, any cross?
Briefly, Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
I have a couple of questions. It's mainly about the suspect car. Now, you indicated that you took DNA swabs from the suspect vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And for the interior driver's door, that's what you labeled that swab, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, for the interior rear passenger door and window molding, that's what you labeled that one, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I also took along the edge of the molding as if somebody was driving westbound on Albert Street and they're hanging out the vehicle, shooting a firearm, their DNA could possibly be on the outer molding of that vehicle, because it would be on the passenger side.
Okay, so that's why you distinguish between just the interior passenger door and in the back, the interior passenger door and molding?
Yes, ma'am.
So can you tell me, with regard to the interior passenger door, what areas of that door did you swab?
The same as the driver's door that I explained in testimony earlier. I still take the window button, the area where you would lay your hand, the little pocket where the little ashtrays used to be in cars. I still swab that area on the door also.
Okay, and you would have done that for the interior passenger's door. You would have swabbed the top where a person would put their hand, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I swab doors the same way every single time.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
All right, redirect.
Thank you. Detective, can you see State's Exhibit 52 on your screen?
Yes, ma'am. That's the front of 710 Spearing Street.
All right. Mr. Hernandez asked you, did you take measurements from the concrete sidewalk to the area of where those casings were found towards the street?
I took it from the area of where the strikes were in the residence to the roadway.
Okay, so when you were referencing bullet hole A, you're actually on the house.
Yes, ma'am. As
Out
close
to the
as I
street.
can with we have a wheel that we can also measure with, so we're actually putting it right on the residence and then going towards where the bullet hole is.
Okay, so you are already up on the house,
Yes, ma'am.
all the way towards the street.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
And with our diagramming program, when we diagram it that way, also to get measurements, the pole is set right where that hole is, and the England coder is what we call it, is out in the roadway, and it shoots back to where I'm at holding the pole.
All right. going to State's Exhibit 10. So if someone was parked in this area of the front yard, not the house, but the yard, can you give this jury any accurate measurement of how far that is from that location to the street?
If you have a direct point in this area that you've circled, where we hold the pole, that's how I can give you an accurate measurement. It has to be, so you have a casing right in that area. I'm putting that, it's a point, a surveyor's point, right on top of that location where that point is. And then the angling coder shoots back, hits the reflector, bounces back, and gives the measurement to the computer.
All right, but my question is, do you have that in this case?
No, ma'am, I don't.
And you said you couldn't get it because the car was where when you found it?
When I arrived, I first got to this call, the car was at UF Health at 655 West 8th Street and not at 710 Spearing Street.
All right. You were asked, showing you State's Exhibit 17, the distance between these 9mm shell casings that you found in the street.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you said that you diagrammed these, but you didn't measure in between these casings.
No, ma'am.
Okay. The fact that these, number 1 is in the street, number 8 is in the dirt, number 7 is down the street, does that tell you anything exactly where the person was shooting from?
No, ma'am. It just tells me where the casing landed and where it was when I got there.
All right. And you indicated, you said, well, counsel asked you, you said, well, when you shoot a firearm, you're assuming that the person is just shooting free and clear, free of any objects, not the fact that they might be an occupant of a car, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if it shoots out to the right and a little bit backwards, and you are moving the firearm around, could you get a casing that hits on the roof and rolls towards the front?
Absolutely. You got several variables in there. You have, in what she's describing, you have a moving vehicle. You have somebody shooting out of a moving vehicle. So you have, bullets coming out, but you're also moving at the same time. So there's several variables. The person's not sitting there as a sharpshooter doing target shooting, professionally, where the gun is actually stationary on the, on a table. You have a human being that moves, and so they're not going to be stationary. They're going to be moving like that. If anybody's ever hold a gun, you don't holding it this way. If you're moving, the gun's going to move with you. If the vehicle's moving, hits a bump, you're going to move with it.
For recoil?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me what recoil is.
Recoil with our Glock. When you fire, you're going to have that little bit of pullback. If you've ever fired a gun, there's that little pullback. Different caliber guns have different recoils. But
essentially you have a kickback.
Yes, ma'am.
So can we take anything from the fact that you found 9mm shell casings in the front of the car? Does that necessarily indicate that the shooter was in the front of the vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, I'm going to take the 7.62 because Mr. Hernandez asked you about that. The fact that you found that 7.62 round wedged in the back seat of that car, assuming that the weapon ejects out to the right and maybe a little bit backwards, if the person shooting is inside of the car and it's kicking out and to the right, where would you expect that round to go?
That round could either go in the rear deck. It could hit the seat, depends on what angle they were holding the firearm. When they were shooting, it could hit the seat and fall between the backrest of the rear passenger seat and the seat cushion, get wedged down in there.
Okay, so can you take really anything from the fact that you found a 7.62 by 39 round wedged in the back seat?
That's where it was.
The fact that the shooter of that weapon was in the back. Can
Correct.
you take anything from that?
It could have bounced from the front all the way to the back. It could have bounced from right there. All I can say is that's where I located that 7.62 by 39 casing wedged between the seat and the cushion.
I don't have any further questions.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
That's right. All right, thank you, Detective. You're excused. All right, State, you may call your next witness.
The state will call Detective Howell.
You solemnly swear affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you please introduce yourself to the juries?
Good afternoon. I'm Sergeant Douglas Paul Howell Jr.
And where are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
For how long?
Almost 16 years, or 15 years, I'm sorry.
Prior to becoming a law enforcement officer with JSO, did you have any prior experience?
Yes, I had almost 2 years of law enforcement experience with the Atlantic Beach Police Department.
Okay. And you are a sergeant now. I called you a detective earlier.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Correct, it's okay.
All right. Prior to becoming a sergeant, where were your assignments within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Prior to being promoted, I was a detective with the Violent Crimes Impact Team. I did that for just under a year. I was also a detective with the Gang Investigative Unit for almost 7 years. Violent Crimes Task Force for another year. Showdown Task Force for 3.5 years, and then patrol.
Okay. In your current assignment as a sergeant, did you carry on that experience that you had with gang work?
Yes, currently I'm assigned to the Zone 4, which is the west side of Jacksonville's, where we have a task force assigned out there, so I'm assigned to that, to run that.
Has been the great majority of your career with the Sheriff's Office in some way, shape, or form entailed working in gang investigations?
Yes, ma'am, it has.
Can you explain that when you were a gang detective and also your work with the impact team, violent crime impact team, did your training and experience come into use?
Yes, very much so, because we documented gangs, documented gang members, investigated the gangs, and assisted other units within the agency when it came to gang members and gangs.
Tell the jury about your training and experience as it relates to gang work.
Again, like you're saying, majority of my career has been dealing with gangs. When I was on Operation Showdown Task Force, we dealt with high crime areas, which included a lot of the gangs in those areas. So we got to learn and deal with a lot of gangs with a hand-on basis. When I went to the gang unit, we went to several training. I went to multiple training classes all over the United States, including Arizona, St. Louis, several places in Arizona. Florida Gang Investigators Association conference here in Jacksonville. I went to several classes in regards to gang work.
Can you tell us about some of the topics in those trainings?
So the topics included like trends, what they were seeing, some of their positive impacts, how they're dealing with gangs, how they're enforcing their laws, how they're doing long-term investigations, the the different trends that they may see for law enforcement for gangs to hide their involvement in gangs from law enforcement. So a lot of that stuff was brought up so it can help all of us in our investigations.
In your work with the sheriff's office, do you operate under a Florida statute in order to identify gang members?
Correct. Florida State Statute 874 deals with gang enforcement.
All right. Are you, through your work, familiar with a gang called 1200 Block?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and do they also have a set within that particular gang referred to as 187?
Correct. Yes, they do.
Can you explain to the members of the jury what that gang entails and who some of the members are?
The gang intel 1200 Block is in regards to an area of Jacksonville on the east side, particularly 1212 East First Street is where it kind of created out of, but it encompasses the east side, basically from the northern part of the stadium to about East 7th Street. And then 187 is a entertainment group within the 1200 Block group.
Is there any distinction? Is 187 like not a gang because they call themselves an entertainment group?
No, what gang members are doing nowadays is they're utilizing the entertainment groups because we're enforcing the Florida State Statute 874 on them, on their gangs, and then so they feel they get under a entertainment group that they're protected and they're not gang members. And in fact, they're still doing the same kind of crimes, same kind of activities as they would as a gang member in a geographical area.
And I want to focus your attention. Are you intimately familiar with that gang, 1200 Block and 187?
Yes, I investigated that group for 6.5 years while on my time with the gang unit.
Okay. So much so that the members of that gang, do they know you?
Yes, very much so.
Do you have a nickname within them?
Yes, it's either Big Sofa or Sofa that they refer me as.
Okay. Now, late 2015, and I'm talking November to December through, and you're familiar with the case that we're here on today, Aiden McClendon.
Yes, ma'am.
During that time period, was 1200 Block or 187 having any particular issues with another rival gang?
Yes, Problem Child Entertainment or PCE.
And do you all work on different gangs? Is there another detective that's assigned to investigate that particular gang?
So each detective is assigned their own particular gangs. So I had 187 1200 Block, while another detective had Problem Child Entertainment. But we work together in regards to these kind of incidents.
Okay, because they're rivals and beefing with one another at that time.
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
Through your experience, do you know about where PCE or their territory was located in Jacksonville, Florida?
Correct. At the time that we were dealing with this incident, it was in the 45th and Moncrief area, particularly in the Hilltop apartment complex area.
You need your approach,
Thank you.
but you are approaching the witness.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got used to the other one. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I thought you meant sidebar. I apologize. All right. These are kind of big, so. All right, first I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification is 21Y, okay? And then I'm going to show you, can you read that number?
22A.
22A, okay? Do you recognize these two exhibits?
Yes, ma'am.
And do they encompass some of the things that you've already testified to us regarding the members and the territories of the two rival gangs?
Correct, it does, yes.
Your Honor, this time the state would seek to introduce 21Y and 22A.
Any objection?
No objection on it.
No objection on the ones previously.
Understood. That would be so admitted.
And also the ones previously made by motions and such.
Understood. Those previously noted.
This is 21.
It's 21Y
21Y,
and
22A.
22A. Okay.
Your Honor, may I have a witness step down, please?
Yes, sir. You may step down, Sergeant. So what are the two exhibits now?
Your Honor, permission to move about the full room?
You certainly may, and Ms. Wright, obviously you may as well. Madam Clerk, the
Judge, so 21Y is gonna be 457 and 22C is gonna be 458.
very good. Thank you.
Sorry, I got something in mind. Can you, stick right here for me and keep your voice up? Yeah, publish, State's Exhibit 457 to the jury.
You may.
All right. I'm showing you a chart. Are you familiar with the individuals that are in this particular chart, sir?
Yes, ma'am, there are documented gang members within the 1200 Block 187 gang organization.
Okay. Can we show the members of the jury down here? So, through your experience with this gang, have you had contact with the great majority of all these individuals?
Yes, probably every single one of them I've identified and made contact with in my investigations.
Okay. I want to ask you, these two up here, Breon Mason and Keon Mason, are they brothers?
Yes, they're brothers.
Okay, and Breon Mason goes by what nickname?
Heroes.
And Keon Mason goes by what nickname?
Good.
Is that common for them to use a name other than their given name?
Correct, yes, it does. It self-identifies them within the gang.
Okay. And then Cameron Thomas, are you familiar with him?
Yes, very much so.
All right. Does he own like a hangout for these guys?
Correct. He rented a location out, a house that was utilized as a trap house and a location that they kind of hung out and hid out during their time.
Is that house yellow?
Yes, it is.
Okay. This Miyake Razor, what nickname does he go by?
Yeah.
And is he a prominent rapper within this group?
He is very much so. He's a kind of a quasi leader, I guess you would kind of say, of the majority of the younger guys.
Okay. Reginald Williams, what's his nickname?
Gucci,
And what about Bill Williams? What's his nickname?
Twin.
Does he also go by
He
Spinavins?
does, yes.
Are you familiar with that term that they use, Spinavins?
Yeah, Spinavins is a terminology they use when they talk about going to do a drive-by shooting. So obviously, his nickname is named that because that's the type of involvement he is in this organization.
Can we show Reginald Ducey Williams down here? And just point out Reginald Ducey Williams,
Reginald right there.
all right? His brother, twin,
Twin, Noah Williams.
okay? Is there a kind of video that they made called F the City Up?
Yes, they did.
Okay, is Juwan Hazelton in that video?
I don't believe he's in that one, no. Or I mean, I'd have to look at it again, but I think he
Okay.
is.
Okay. And then, Lawrence McCauley, what's his nickname?
This is Little Man. He was just in that video as well.
Okay. And oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Most important. Aiden McKnight.
Yeah, being a little shook.
Okay. Is he beloved by all of these individuals in this particular gang?
He is. Once he was murdered out in this area, and after he was murdered, they took on the moniker of Suge Nation to kind of commemorate him.
Okay. So, they call themselves 187 pretty much before. Did they have T-shirts and things like that made?
They did, yes. They had all kinds of paraphernalia, I guess you could call it, within the gang organization, which includes shirts and hats and stuff.
Your Honor, may I publish State's Exhibit 458?
You may.
Oh.
I've moved back. Yes,
All right. This is what I was asking you earlier. Can you point out the location of the territory of 187 or 1200 block?
It's within this blue box here in the audio, which is the east side of Jacksonville. So pretty much this line right here within this blue line.
When we say east side of Jacksonville, we mean east of downtown?
East of downtown, that's correct.
All right, let's point it out down here. So the area for 1200 block of 187.
Would encompass this blue full area.
Okay, now here, PCE.
Correct. This is the PC area, which would encompass the red block, particularly where the dots are at. It's a lot of where they come.
Okay, down here, PCE.
PC is within the red block area, particularly central Lansing, where the dots are at, which is that 45th and Moncrief area.
Thanks. If you can take a scan again. Are you familiar with the kind of concentrated hangouts of 1200 block or 187?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted in as State's Exhibit 449. Is that a more concentrated map into the out east, or 1200 block or 187 territory?
Okay, correct.
Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar.
Okay. I'm going to start first with this yellow store.
That's a local hangout for them. They're always situated in front of that building at all days and times.
All right. Did they almost commemorate that store in his song?
They did. They made a video called Yellow House, Yellow Store.
And then, not from that song, but did Cam also have a yellow house that's situated directly down the street from that yellow store?
Correct, yes, at 1148 Pippin Street, he did.
Okay. And are you familiar with the scene involving 710 Spearing Street that we're here on today?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Is that in close proximity to both of those locations?
Correct, it's several blocks away from each other.
Showing you State's Exhibit 9, are you familiar with that house?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Is that within the 1200 block or 187 gang territory?
That is, yes.
Your Honor, may we press sidebar?
You may, do you need the court reporter?
Yes.
You're learning, aren't you? Okay. All right, do y'all need me for any of this? Okay, I'll see you at 11 o'clock. a couple evidentiary issues we need to resolve before we bring in the juries. We do have all the lawyers present as well as Mr. Hayes and Mr. Richardson. Is there anything we need to discuss then before we bring in the juries in terms of, okay, go ahead.
Actually, not this week, certainly can address it.
I'd like to just go ahead and get it done so we don't have to approach sidebar.
Well, I'm starting a couple minutes early before our break, so.
Your Honor, we would ask, these are still photographs taken from the poll cam that the court has already made a ruling on. My understanding is counsel wants to maintain their objections to that, but if we could go ahead and have this marked into evidence, and
Right.
I can go over the letters.
Sure, this is the Pippin Street poll cam, so y'all maintain your objection.
Maintain the objections made in the Green Rule hearing. Under the motion to strike the weeds.
Yeah.
As far as it not being weeds rule. Also, any photograph of January 16th, make the notice, the extra notice objection. It's not given in 10 days.
I understand. Ms. Wright, same position for Mr. Richardson?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I've already ruled on that, as has been indicated. These are merely still photos from that same camera. So with those objections noted, these photographs can be admitted into evidence as the next appropriate exhibit number.
Yes, Your Honor, and then for the record, it's 19E as in Edward through 19N as in Nancy. I'll do them single. It's 19E. Yes, they are. I'm sorry. 19E, 19F, 19G, 19H, 19I, 19L, 19M as in Mary, and 19N as in Nancy. That's the next number of exhibits. Because we had two that were already marked into evidence.
Right. Now those, the description has poll camera video. These are actually still photos from that video.
Yes, sir. I indicated in the block above that these were photographs and videos, I believe, in the description, I think. I did.
Says,
Photographs. Okay, so I did, so I didn't have to type it every single time. These are photographs and videos leading up to that.
oh, let's see. All right. And while those are being marked, can you give me the numbers?
Yes, Judge. So there would be 474 through 478, and then 479 through 481. And that's starting with 19E and going down.
All right. Now, also, before we bring in the jury, there were some evidence introduced or referenced yesterday by stipulation they were coming in, but I did not make an announcement that those exhibits have been entered. I want to clarify that, so can we discuss that next?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, you could, I believe that the last, I think I did 413 was the last number that I ended with. I did not, okay, okay, so the clerk has informed me that I stopped at 398, which would have ended, the ID numbers as 16H. And then at this point, 16I, which was 399, through 6T. As far as Henry Hayes is concerned, those would be numbered consecutively based upon the court's ruling. This is a little bit more complicated when you get to this area. As it relates to 16M as in Mary, the state of Florida agreed not to introduce that in Richardson's case. And then as it relates to 16P, the video from Henry Hayes' cell phone, which is a cell phone video with Henry Hayes with the red pants and guns. The state of Florida did not introduce that one against Richardson. So his numbers would be this is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to get to the court. So for Henry Hayes, it's easy. So from 398 to 410, it's been marked consecutively. And then 16U has been entered in over the defense objection is 411. 16B is in Victor, has been entered in Hayes as 412. 16Z was a murder scene map that was entered in as, I'm sorry, let me find 413. 17A is 413. 17B was 414. (17L), which are the medical examiner photos, have been marked all the way through 17L through 18F is 415 through 435 consecutively. (18G) through 18L have been marked consecutively. There are two objections lodged to 18K and 18L, so this has been held aside. The video photographs have not come in yet. The full videos, I believe that we have already discussed, 19J and K are 447, 448, 19O and P, 450, 451, 19Q, 442 through 19U, 446. (17C) came in as 453. 17D came in as 454. And I believe the clerk may have some additional items I've marked in on this list.
So, the ones we entered, 19W, the 20J, those are 459 to 473.
19J.
19B to 20J, sorry. 19 through 20J is the photos that we just entered, which were 459 to 473.
But those, I'm talking about the ones that haven't been addressed in the record, so we've already addressed those. Are there any additional that we didn't address? 19J and K. Okay. I believe those were entered with Jordan Harris, is my recollection. I'm sorry. I know, but those were subject to objection. There was no objection, we offered those, and then there was no objection, I believe the court entered those on the record with Jordan Harris, is my recollection. But the 19J and K came in at 447 and 448. And Your Honor, at the end, can we address the Richardson, because it's a little bit more confusing, to make sure that we number them consecutively?
You mean more confusing than what it's been already?
No, just that his numbers are going to be off from Hayes.
I know. I'm ready to bring the juries in.
Yes, sir.
We're 5 minutes late. And to get the gallery in as well?
I don't know what photo it is.
It was in the poll cam. Did you have the poll cam in there?
Yeah, we had a copy.
I can't see it unless it's me. That one. No. I thought you had the one I'm standing, this one in there. Okay. Can you drag that one? Just, where's mine?
All right, you ready to bring in the juries? Are we ready for the juries? All right, bring in the juries.
Thanks.
The jury is entering the courtroom.
All right, y'all can take your seats. Thank you. All right, we're ready to continue on with the trial. Ms. Kite, you may continue.
Sir, I was asking you about different members of 187, and you're familiar with all of those members, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In your work and through your investigation, do the members of 187 use social media in order to post pictures of themselves wearing gang paraphernalia or clothing?
Yes, it's a way to promote their gang or affiliation.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked for identification as 19B, but is now 459. In evidence, do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recognize the individuals in that photograph?
I recognize several, yes.
Who?
To the right, you have Reginald Ducey Williams.
You can circle him.
Okay, I'm sorry. Reginald Ducey Williams here, little man, Lawrence McCauley. And then you have, that is Avery McKnight Shug.
Okay. And the clothing that we see with them on, this is before Avery McKnight died, is that right?
Correct. This was the around the beginning of their creation.
Okay, so this is around the beginning.
Correct.
And they would wear shirts called 187 Boys?
Yes.
And then on Reginald's shirt, it has it looks like gang shit.
Yes, that's correct. That's what it is.
Showing you State's Exhibit 9W for identification, but is now 460. Do you recognize that individual?
Yes, that's Avery Suge McKnight, Little Suge McKnight.
Okay. And again, is he wearing the types of shirts that they would typically wear?
Yes, ma'am, they would.
Are you familiar with that hand sign?
Yes, that's the hand sign for 1200 block.
And how do they get that out of this?
The finger, your pointer finger is the 1, and then these are the 2 for 1200.
Okay. State's Exhibit 9X, it was marked for identification, but now it's 461. Who is that?
That again is Avery Little Suge McKnight.
Wearing the common shirt that they will wear in their creation?
Yes, ma'am, correct.
Showing you what was marked as 19Y is 462 now in evidence. Do you recognize these two individuals?
Yes, that's Reginald, again, Ducey Williams. I believe that's Avery McKnight again.
Circle Reginald Williams. All right, and that hand sign that he's using, what is he doing?
Again, it's representing 1200 block.
State's Exhibit 19Z, is this a photograph taken at the video that I said F the city at earlier?
Yes, it is.
Okay. At this point in time, had Suge, Avery McKnight, had he died at this point?
Yeah, he was deceased at this point.
Did they change from the shirts that we saw earlier, the 187 boys, to something different?
Correct, yes, they were utilizing Suge Nation is what they were adopting at that time.
Okay. So they were calling themselves Suge Nation
Correct.
after Suge McKnight?
Yes, to memorialize Avery McKnight's death.
Okay. I'm circling an individual with a camo shirt and a gold picture on it. Do you recognize first that person with that shirt on?
Correct, that's little man Lawrence McCauley, and he's wearing a shirt with Avery McKnight on his face on the front of it.
Okay, so did they change from the 187 boys to this picture of Suge McKnight?
Correct, yes, they did.
Okay. And I'm going to circle here at the bottom, this individual.
Yes.
See, they're wearing it on their shirts, on their pants.
Correct,
Okay, and they call themselves Suge Nation.
it is correct.
Are they throwing multiple gang signs in this photograph?
Yes, they are.
Showing you State's Exhibit 464. Who's in this photograph?
Again, it's Reginald Williams and Avery McKnight.
State's Exhibit 465, which was 20B before. Do you recognize these individuals?
Yes, correct, they're all part of 187 1200 block.
Okay. Who's this in the middle of the photograph?
That is going to be Noah Williams,
Or twin?
twin, correct.
Who's this at the bottom of the photograph?
Avery McKnight,
Who's this in kind of the forefront of the photograph?
Reginald Williams.
And remember, I talked about Jawan Hazelton earlier?
Correct, Juwan, yes.
Who is that?
That's Lawrence McCauley,
Or Lil Man?
little man, correct.
Are they some of the prominent members besides Jawan Hazelton?
Correct,
They're
they're the-
Twin, Ducey, Little Man, and Suge, some of the prominent members of 187.
Correct, they're always in the forefront of everything, whether it's social media, pictures, or the rap videos.
State's Exhibit 442, are you familiar with that location?
Yes, ma'am, that's the yellow store that they congregate at on a regular basis.
Okay, and is this yellow store in close proximity to where Avery died?
Yes, it's 1 block away from there.
State's Exhibit 443, another photo of the yellow store?
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I want to pay attention to this area here. It looks like some type of advertisement of some sort in front of the window.
Yes,
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit 20C or 466. Are they standing in front of that same area that I circled in the previous photograph?
yes, ma'am,
A little bit different advertisement, but same area.
correct.
Who's in this photograph?
You have Avery McKnight, Reginald Williams, again, are standing in the background.
Okay, and are they throwing 1200 block?
Yes,
Showing you 20D or 467. Are they by the yellow store again?
again, yes, they are, but they're on this would be the east side of the store.
And is this Ducci or
Correct.
Reginald Williams?
Correct, that's Reginald Williams.
Shug McKnight,
Yes,
Lawrence McCauley.
correct.
Who's this?
And that's Miyake Razor.
Who's this?
I believe it's going to be Noah, but I can't really tell.
Oh, he's
With
got
his-
his face hidden.
With the hands in his face.
Okay. State's Exhibit 20E, which is now 468. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
Okay. Is this Lil Man or Lawrence McCauley?
that is,
Is this Jamari Brooks?
yes, ma'am.
Is that Reginald Williams?
That is correct, yes.
Showing you 469, which was 20F. Is that Reginald Williams and Avery McKnight holding guns?
That is correct, yes.
State's Exhibit 446, are you familiar with that location?
Yes, that's the house that Cameron Thomas occupied.
Okay. And Cameron Thomas's, I guess, part of that house is on the right-hand side,
Correct, it was a duplex, and he had the right side.
right? And then I wanted, is there a stoop with some white bricks with a small chain link fence on the left side?
Correct, there is, yes.
But would they hang out all over this front of this house?
Front, back, side, yes.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit 20G or 470. Is that stoop area that I circled in the other part of the house?
That is, yes.
All right. Is that Cam?
That is Cameron, yes.
All right. State's Exhibit 20H, which is now 471. Who is that in that photograph? And is that at Cam's house?
I'm sorry, what'd you say at the end?
Who is in that photograph, and is that at Cam's house?
Yes, this is the front of Cam's house, which would be his side of the structure, and then this would be Reginald Williams holding the axe, and then Avery McKnight to the side.
And then showing you State's Exhibit 472, which was 20I. Is this Reginald Williams?
That is, yes.
And you indicated earlier that 187 is associated or kind of blended with 1200 block?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So this shirt that he has is a little bit obscure. That's the 187 logo.
Yes, correct, that's their logo.
And then it has a reference to 1200.
Correct.
And what used to be 20J, showing the witness, State's Exhibit 473. Can you identify who's in that photo?
Left to right, you have Reginald Williams right here. You'll have Avery McKnight, Little Man, Lawrence McCauley. You have Man, Leonard Andrews, and you have Noah Williams. And I'm not sure of the name on the last subject.
Okay. Now, I want to, if you were standing at the yellow store and looking out, is this the view you would have of these apartments in the back?
Correct, those are Oakland Terrace apartments coming out of the yellow store.
Okay. So this is documentation of this is their territory or area?
Correct, it's very well known throughout the city, that's their area.
Okay. And where Shug died, is that literally just right next to this location that we have in this particular picture?
Yes, ma'am, it is. It's just on the other side of the apartment complex.
Okay. All right, maybe briefly the first sidebar.
Yes, ma'am. Do we need the court reporter?
I don't believe so.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have an instruction for you about the evidence you're about to see. The evidence you are about to receive concerning other crimes, wrongs, or acts allegedly committed by the defendants will be considered by you for the limited purpose of proving motive, opportunity, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, identity, and you shall consider it only as it relates to those issues. However, the defendants are not on trial for any crime, wrong, or act that is not included in the indictment. Ms. Scott, you may continue.
Thank you. Knowing what you knew about their locations that they would commonly hang out in, did you, as an investigative tool, place a poll cam up looking at one of those locations?
I did, yes, the 1148 Pippin Street address.
Okay. And when you put that poll camera up, are you, as the investigator of this particular gang, able to operate it and view it remotely?
Correct. I can rewind it and look back at what was recorded from the past, and then I can also watch it live.
Did your poll camera capture an incident at the Yellow House on January 16, 2016?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
And what did it capture?
A drive-by shooting.
Okay. Just prior to that shooting, were there members of the group 187 that we've gone over at that house just prior to the shooting?
There was, yes.
Okay. And was that shooting on January 16th ever reported to the police?
No, it was never reported.
I had just a minute. Your Honor, may I publish what's been entered as State Exhibit 397?
You may.
While I'm inserting this disc and switching out the media, can you explain just a little bit about how you're able to operate it, and when you, in fact, capture this, were you monitoring it at this point in time?
Correct. It's a remote camera that's covertly and stealthy put in an area where we can capture a particular location. At this point, we captured the house in question. I can, again, rewind it. We have controls that we're able to use that will allow us to pan in, pan out, in, zoom out to try to get better pictures. A lot of it, you'll find that you'll see skipping within the video itself. The skipping is put in because if we don't put, what it'll do, the breeze will catch like wires and trees, and there's nobody outside, so we try to allow its sensitivity to pick up bigger objects like people and cars. If we don't do that, then it's going to take up a system or a hard drive or multiple hard drives. So we try to limit the amount of video that's captured onto a hard drive. So we bring down the sensitivity for that reason.
Okay. I've loaded it up. We're looking at the poll camera. Do you recognize this video?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had an opportunity to look at it prior to coming to court?
Yes.
And I'm going to play or publish State's Exhibit 397 at this time, Your Honor. I'm going to pause this video at 10:12:45. The 10:12:45, is that the time of day?
Yes, that's morning time, a.m.
Okay. And that white car is driving by the yellow house at this point in time?
Correct, it is.
Is it going the opposite direction at the time of the shooting?
Yes, it's going
Back.
westbound at this point.
Okay. And because this camera is a little bit far away, and we should know what we're looking for, do you see something that indicates that that is in fact the shooting?
Nothing at this point that would.
No, but later on.
Oh, later on, yes. If you'll, as the vehicle comes back eastbound, in the opposite direction, if you'll pay attention to like, this area right here, you'll start to see like dust kicking up from where they're shooting at the subjects in the vehicle.
Okay. I'm going to play the video now.
This is the target vehicle in question that are victims of this shooting.
Okay, I'm going to pause it at 10:16:21 a.m. on this video. Is that, you said that car belongs to who?
Cameron Thomas, that was his rental car.
It was a rental car?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that just after the shooting there?
Yes,
Okay, and the dust was kicking up?
correct. As the vehicle went, right before the vehicle was going by, you can see dust kicking up from the driveway.
I'm going to play a slower version of that in just a second, but that black figure kind of on the outside of the hood, is that a 187 gang member?
Correct, that's one of the occupants inside the vehicle ducking from the shooting.
I'm going to play this video out, and then I'm going to play a slower version of the shooting itself, but what do they do after the shooting?
They park the car and kind of walk off like nothing ever happened.
Is that them walking off?
Correct, yes.
Are you able to see that person?
Yes, that's Cameron Thomas.
He's so, like, far away in this. Was he in the same outfit later on?
Yes,
You had contact with him?
I had contact with him several days later, and he was wearing the same exact outfit.
Okay. Okay. So that's how they act right after they got shot at?
Correct, like nothing ever happened. Like it's almost like a normal day for him.
Okay. Playing a slow version. In that slower version, can you see the dust?
Yes, ma'am.
Coming
You-
Did you leave this whole camera up for some time on Pippin Street, even after this shooting was caught on there?
I did, yes, ma'am.
On January 18th, was there anything of note that you caught on the poll camera?
Yes, ma'am. I started a live feed onto the camera from my actual residence due to the fact that we had the shooting. We caught several members outside the residence itself, and during that time, I was able to zoom in and capture Cameron Thomas, who is a convicted felon, stepping outside as they observed a vehicle with an AK-47, almost in a sense of getting ready to protect himself from a drive-by.
Just a moment, trying to locate the other video. While Mr. Hutton is locating that video, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Detective, let me show you State's Exhibit 476. I couldn't pause it in time. This is a photograph taken from that video. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that some type of person hanging out the side of that vehicle?
Yes, ma'am, that is.
And that's after the shooting in time?
Correct.
That we've just seen?
Correct.
I believe that we've seen this video before. I don't think I'm going to play the whole thing, but the zooming in and the zooming out that we see in the movement of the camera, you indicated that you were operating that live.
Correct. I was controlling it from my computer.
Okay. This individual that we have in State's Exhibit 447, are these the members of 187 at that yellow house?
It is. Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 448, is that Lil Man or Lawrence McCauley?
That is, yes.
Is that twin or Noah Williams behind him?
Yes.
On 19N, which is State's Exhibit 481, is that them congregating?
Yes, in front of the residents.
And did you find Cam Ron Thomas with a firearm, or did you see him with a firearm on that day?
Yes, on that day, yes.
And so did you use this video to help arrest him?
Correct. We utilized the video for a search warrant and arrest warrant.
Did you leave that poll camera up on January 29th, 2016?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the day that you were, I guess, notified to help in the investigation of the death of Aiden McClendon?
Yes, I was.
Your Honor, if I may publish State's Exhibit 399.
You may.
Have you had an opportunity to view the poll camera video prior to coming to court as it relates to January 29th, 2016?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, the time that's at the top of that video, does that indicate the time of day that this happened?
Yes, it does.
Is this in military time?
Yes, it is. It would be 6:01.
Okay. And that white car that just drove by, it drove by at 6:01?
Correct.
Your camera, does it capture the lighting on the day at 6:01?
Yes, it does.
All right. So I didn't pause that video, but I'm referring back to State's Exhibit 450 that's been admitted. Is that a still shot of that car driving by that house on Pippin Street approximately, actually at 18:01:43?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. And then State's Exhibit 451, the same car driving past that house.
Correct, yes.
And again, is this house located in close proximity to 710 Spearing Street?
Yes, like I said, several blocks as the crow flies.
You're familiar with the area, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it literally take minutes to get to 710 Spearing Street?
Yeah, a minute or two, not too far.
All right. I don't have anything further.
All right, Cross.
The Florida statute on gangs has a number of factors, does it not?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
How a person dresses,
Correct.
whether they have the tattoos,
Yes, sir.
whether they're hanging around other documented gang members, is that
Correct,
right?
associating with them, yes.
There are other factors also, is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Type of clothing they're wearing,
Correct.
any other factors that I've missed?
You have your parent, the parent could tell us about them being involved in the gang. You have a confidential informant who gives you the information. You can be associating 4 or more times. There's associating with them, and then there's one where you're associating 4 or more times with the subject. You have a confidential source or informant who's untested reliability, and you corroborate that with additional information. Or they also have authored criminal acts for the gang as well.
You were shown State Exhibit 468, in which Lawrence McCauley and Jamari Brooks was in it. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Jamari Brooks, is he a documented gang member of 187?
I'd have to go back and look at the documentation. I don't know at this point.
Do you have your documentation with you?
No, I do not.
He was certainly affiliating, at least in that picture, with
Yes,
gang
sir.
members of 187, is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes, sir.
You don't have a memory of whether he's a gang member?
I've been away from the gang unit for over a year and a half at this point. I mean, and so I have to see his documentation to see if it's there.
But he certainly met one of those factors, is that correct?
Correct. In a sense, yes.
And you need one of those factors to be affiliated, is that correct?
To be associated, correct.
Associate, right?
Correct.
He could have more factors and could actually be documented.
Yeah, if you have,
187 gang members, is that right?
you have one more criteria, then you meet as a gang member, yes.
And that would be in your documentation, is that correct?
Correct.
I have no other questions.
Mr. Wright, any Cross?
Good morning, Detective. You indicated that for that incident on January 16th, you had a poll cam, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, it would be fair to say that you weren't there, is that correct?
Correct.
And you were just looking at that video just like the rest of us, is that also true?
That is true.
Now, obviously, that video is centered on that house, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So all you could see is what's on the video. You couldn't see just beyond the video, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you actually couldn't even see the entire house from the angle that you had it at that moment. Is that also true?
Correct. You're only catching it south facing north.
Now, you indicated that there was some dust kicking up at one point. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the only information you have regarding whether or not there was a shooting at that house?
No, ma'am.
Is that the only information that you yourself have seen, that there was a shooting at this house?
I've seen, but I've gathered more intelligence after the fact that there was a shooting at that house.
On just the 16th or also on the 18th?
No, we effected a search warrant on that house on the 19th of January.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask to put sidebar before the witness finishes answering.
Well, do you have another question, Ms. Wright, on this, in this line of questions?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And no sidebar.
You're very familiar with that yellow house, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you would agree they sell drugs there?
Yes, ma'am.
And you indicated that in one of the videos, well, in the video, Jordan Harris was present, is that correct?
I never mentioned Jordan Harris at all.
Did you recognize a Jordan Harris present in one of the poll cam videos?
If I do, I don't, the only time I ever had any interaction with Mr. Harris was at the time of the shooting Aiden McClendon. I've never seen or heard of him prior to that. And that's the only interaction I've ever had with him.
And you also indicated that the person in the video was Cameron Thomas, I guess?
Yes, ma'am.
He goes by the name of Killer Cam, is that correct?
Killer Cam, yes.
Does he ever go by KK?
I mean, could, it means KK for Killer Cam, yes.
I don't have any questions.
Redirect.
They are.
May this witness be excused?
I changed my mind.
Then please proceed.
Yes. Sir, when you view shootings like this after the fact, and you said you gather intelligence later on, are the members that you're talking to, are they generally cooperative with law enforcement?
No, not generally. Some are, but not to the full extent. They're only going to give you bits and pieces, but to the most part, they're not.
Okay, so when you all are trying to make cases on this, are they uncooperative and not wanting to go any further than maybe talking to you off the record?
Correct, yes.
All right. Thank you. I don't have anything further.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Detective, you're excused, or Sergeant, you're excused.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, it's a longer witness. You want me to start it and then just, I'm happy to do that.
Well, it's never really a bad time to break for lunch, is it, ladies and gentlemen? It's a little earlier than yesterday, but I think this is a good time to do that since we got a long witness. So that's what we'll do. We'll break for lunch. Please remember not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or look up any information about the case. Let's be back promptly at 1 p.m. and we'll continue the trial this afternoon. Enjoy your lunch. May not share your enthusiasm about that. I told them it could be